He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director, and the author of 2 books on creative briefs.
And he's Henry Gomez, an advertising strategist with over 20 years of experience in the advertising world. And together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and all things advertising. Well, Henry, we're back, and today's topic is a subject that you and I have had a number of disagreements about over the years. I work for the Association of National Advertisers as an instructor, and I go around the country teaching creative brief writing. Well, they have, not surprisingly, they have a task force on creative briefs, and it's populated by some very big heavyweights, CEOs, chief marketing officers, chief creative officers, and the title of this document is called Better Creative Briefs. It's 17 pages, it's to the point, and it's very powerful. It's a cogent argument. But the one that you and I had a little discussion about is a point that they make regarding how to create the creative brief. And they argue that it should be a single document collaborated on by the agency and the client in collaboration, a single document, not a back and forth. And I'm curious about your take on this position, because I think you have something strong to say about it. Henry?
You sent me that paper and I read it, and I find the intent noble, but I find that in practice, it wouldn't work. Now, we have to step back and say there are different environments, right, in which advertising is being created. Some clients have in-house agencies. Some clients have in-house creative resources, departments that help them with certain communications, and outside agencies that help them with other communications. And some clients have just outside agencies. And my view of it is, if you're hiring an outside agency, it's because you want outside counsel. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. And that doesn't mean that's the only way to solve your advertising and communications problems. But there's a lot to be said, just like companies hire litigators when they need to litigate. They go out of house rather than having their in-house attorneys do litigation, because it's a different specialty. And advertising agencies bring some of that outside perspective to the game. And so I've always looked at the creative brief as a work product of the agency, and it's the first step of the agency's creative process, rather than the last step of the order taking process, in which the client establishes what they want. Now, where I've worked in the past is typically there's a Marcom brief or communications brief that the client issues, and then the agency writes a brief. Sometimes that brief is shared with the client and approved. Sometimes we keep that to ourselves. We agree to what the client has briefed us on, but we somehow get to a tighter, more creative brief. And what I've found is that trying to sell some clients on these internal briefs is very difficult, because they're not the end audience for those briefs. Creatives are the end audience for those briefs. And as we've discussed in the past, I'm a full-time strategist. But that said, I write maybe half a dozen briefs a year. So most of the time I am not writing briefs, but it is at the core of what I do as a strategist. And therefore, everything that I'm doing in those other days that I'm not writing briefs is with an eye toward the moment that I have to sit down and write a brief. So I'm always thinking about it. Most clients simply aren't prepared. The ones that take your course, I think, are better prepared, right? But I just don't see that most clients are prepared to do that. And I don't want to engage in debates about a brief when we have more important work to do, which is to get those creatives going, and we already know what the client expectations are.
I think we disagree on this one, Henry. And I think the point that I would make is that even as a creative, as someone who reads the brief that you and your colleagues, in my experience, would write for me, in my experience over the years as an agency staff member, nevertheless, because I am working with a lot of marketers, and many of them are now engaged in a new world of in-house ad agencies, one of the things that I'm aware of, that I think you're aware of too, is the fact that agencies and clients don't have the long-term relationships that they used to have back in the day. A new CMO comes in and all of a sudden the agency is out the door. My belief is that this collaborative process that the ANA is proposing is a way to build a bonding relationship between client and agency, and to understand how the two sides of the same coin think and operate together. I understand that this is turf. This is turf that you're defending. And when I'm out on the road teaching this topic, I tell people that the only people truly trained in writing a brief are account planners like you. But not every agency has an account planner. Not every in-house agency has an account planner. So we have to make up for that fact by putting our heads together. And I think that's why this is such an elegant solution. And you know what? When you have some bigwigs like the committee, like this task force at the ANA making this argument, I've got to sit back and listen. But I'm going to let you have the final word on that one.
So I believe it's a noble goal, and you and I have had a conversation about this. I'm not, I don't have so much hubris as to think that only planners can write a good brief. In fact, good account people can write a good brief, good clients can write good briefs. But it is something that takes time and practice. Most clients don't have the bandwidth, nor do they do it frequently enough to get there. Last time we talked about writing and how to become a good writer. You have to do a lot of writing. And so when you don't do this very often, it becomes more difficult to do it well. So that's what I would say to that. Now I have a surprise for you. I'm kind of going to drop a little bomb on you. So I have a paper too here in front of me. And this paper is called Briefing an Agency. And it was put out by the IPA in the UK, which is the Institute for Practitioners of Advertising, by the ISBA, the MAA, and the PRCA. So basically all the industry trade groups in the UK, where they take advertising very seriously. And they there's a couple of passages I'm going to read to you real quick, and I know we're short on time. Some advertisers may use versions of their agency's creative brief formats for the basis of their own. Whilst this may initially look as if it is encouraging a collaborative way of working, it does demonstrate a lack of belief in the company's own practices. An agency's internal creative brief usually serves the fundamentally different purpose of inspiring their own creative people. A client marketing communications brief needs to inspire the whole agency team to deliver the best communications. Most Marcom's briefs also act as business process document to initiate a job start. In effect, it's a purchase order, and since large sums of money will be involved in both time and resources, it needs to be taken very seriously. So they're making a case for a difference between a Marcom brief and an agency creative brief. And in fact, at the end, their summary of their paper, they have a top tips section, and it says, recognize the difference between marketing communications brief and the agency's internal creative brief. So I would tend to fall on the side of the IPA and the PRCA and the organizations in the UK.
Okay, I know I promised you the last word, but I'm going to say something, because I've never said in this conversation that there should be two briefs. There should be one brief. The agency and the client collaborate on a single brief, and I think you've missed the point there. So I think this is an opportunity for the agency to teach the client what goes into writing a brilliant creative brief. You have told me many times, writing a creative brief is easy. Writing a brilliant creative brief, that's hard. This is where you and I can teach them. And I think with that,
we're done with this.
We're done with this, but we should also let our viewers know, where do you land on this? Do you think there should be collaboration between client and agency, or should there be two briefs the way they are now? A Marcom brief from the client, and the agency responds with its own brief. Let us know. Respond by contacting us on our websites. If you and we'll let you know in future episodes where you stand.
So Howard, for today's creative review, you sent me a spot from Mont Blanc Pens featuring Spike Lee. I think we're going to roll that now, and then I'd like you to comment on it when we come back.
Fort Greene, summer of '77, exterior day. There's a man, he's 20 years young, but he sees the world through the lens of a Super 8 camera for the first time, and nothing's the same. But his story doesn't start here. Cut back to kitchen table, Cobble Hill. His mother says you always have to be 10 times better. So he keeps writing and does not stop. He writes about the heat, about the game, about the block, and home. He writes with his heart, his music, his way of seeing things, and always by hand. His left hand. And it keeps writing and writing and writing and writing until it all cuts to black. Title appears. This is a story of a storyteller from Brooklyn.
Okay, Henry, this is a great spot. Mont Blanc is a legacy brand. And what I love particularly about this as a creative is the fact that it's an emotional story. It's a connecting me with a story that Spike Lee is telling about his entire career. There is not a single piece of information, no facts, no features, no benefits. And that's something that I hear a lot when I'm out on the road training for the ANA. The question I hear probably the most often is, what is the point of differentiation? And I want to pull my hair out when I hear that, because it's really about what is distinctive about this product. And I've heard you discuss that many times as well. This story about Mont Blanc and how it fits into the artist's life, I think is wonderful. I really love this.
I really love the spot too. I think the casting of Spike Lee and his inflection, the video that rolls, the old-timey Super 8 footage, all of it puts you in that place. So executed brilliantly. I think what you're getting at, Howard, is there's different types of advertising for different types of clients and situations. And Mont Blanc is a luxury brand. Let's face it, it's not cheap to buy a Mont Blanc pen. They compete with brands like Waterman. They're not competing with brands like Paper Mate or Bic. So the features become less important. In fact, we could argue that a fountain pen, which is what Spike is using in the commercial, is probably the least kind of convenient way of writing that there is. It's actually a little eccentric, but that's the point of a luxury item. So in my mind, this is pure branding. This is about associating this luxury brand with somebody who is a known storyteller and putting that pen in his hand and telling us that this is how storytellers write stories. They write them longhand with a fountain pen and make you want to emulate that. And it creates a desire through that. So I see it as brilliantly done. The one beef I had with it was that the tagline felt a little generic. What moves you makes you. I think they could have gone for something about writing and storytelling, just like he says at the end of the spot. It would have been a stronger closeout.
I'm a little afraid to say this, Henry, but we agree. I will try not to let that happen too often. Good stuff.
Agree, but different perspectives. And it's always
right.
Well,
he's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. And together we're the Brief Brothers. And we'll see you next time right here.
See you again. Take it easy.